Anyone for leftovers? So jumping right in today, I'm using an 8x8 flat canvas from Indigo Blue, and I'm gluing down this DigiDownload sheet, which I'll explain a little bit more about in a moment, with the paper matte medium from Mod Podge. And the reason I'm jumping straight in is because the first minute or so of the video disappeared for some strange reason. I don't know why, but that's technology for you. Anyway, the DigiDownload. Okay, so the sheet that I'm currently adding the Mod Podge to the back of, this is one of my DigiDownload Christmas sets for 2016. So this is one of the graphic ones. I used some of the backs in my cards a few days ago, and I'm now using one of the graphic papers to completely cover the front of this 8x8 canvas. So I'm making sure it's all nicely stuck down, sealed, and for once, bubble and wrinkle free. So once I'm happy that it's completely sealed and completely covered with that matte medium, I'm going to grab the heat gun and dry it before moving on to the next step. And the next step is I'm going to grab my sanding block and I'm going to distress the edges and blend the paper into the canvas just by sanding the outer edge. This just helps to soften the edges and blend it better onto the canvas. But as per usual, because it's a repetitive process and you don't really want to sit there and watch me sanding all four sides, I'm just showing you a couple of them, and then I'm going to jump to where I've already done all four, and then I'm ready for the next step. So the next step for me is to add a gesso wash across the entire of the canvas. So I'm just putting some of the white gesso from Indigo Blue on my craft mat, adding some water, and then just mixing it up, and then adding a light wash right the way over the entire of the front of the canvas, which will knock the pattern back into the background where I don't want it to be too overpowering. So this is the reason why I'm adding that white wash to it. So now that I've completely covered my canvas with that gesso, I'm just going to give it a little warm, which is going to help just set it and dry it before I can move on to the next stage, because we do need to make sure that the paper is flat again, and heating it will tighten it back up onto the canvas. So the gesso's all dry, and you can still see the pattern behind there, but it has just been knocked back into the background. So next up, I've got my modelling paste from Winsor & Newton. I'm just going to add some to my craft mat, and then I'm going to grab the Flourish stencil from Tim Holtz and Stampers Anonymous. I'm just going to add a little bit of that modelling paste through the stencil around the canvas, just to create a little bit of texture and a little bit of interest over the top of that pattern background paper. And of course, before we can do anything else now, we need to make sure that our modelling paste is completely dry on that canvas. So I'm just going to grab my heat gun and again, give it a gentle warm just to make sure it's all nice and dry before moving on to the next stage. Next up, I'm going to add some drippage to the canvas. So for that, I'm going to be using the Goldfinger Metallic Acrylic Paint from Indigo Blue. I'm just going to add some to my craft mat, and then add some water to it, and then I'm going to create some drips and runs down the canvas from the top by adding it and then spritzing it with water. It's just a case of, let's just see how this works and what happens, and if it's not sufficient, then I'll add some splatters to it later. So I'm just mopping up all the excess and just drying off the bottom. Then I'm going to grab my heat gun and give that a gentle dry, and then I'm probably going to add some more splatters, or I know I'm going to add some more splatters because I want more of that gold in there and there's not enough. So to create the splatters, I'm doing exactly the same thing as I've done 1,000 times before, adding the paint to the craft mat, adding some water, and then using the fan brush just to spritz and drop those drips onto the page all over. And then of course we need it drying, so I'm going to grab my heat gun and give it a nice gentle dry to make sure that all of that metallic paint is nice and dry before moving on to the next stage of adding my focal images. So for the focal images, I'm going to use over some of the leftover ephemera from the festive ephemera pack from Tim Holtz, and I'm just going to stick some of the items down using the tacky glue from Anita's, which is just standard craft glue, craft PVA. So I'm just going to arrange some of these ephemera pieces onto the front of my canvas just with glue. I'm only sticking it in the middle so I can add bits and tuck bits under, leaving the outer edges free, and then later on I'll add some glue to the outer edges to make sure that they're stuck down nicely. I love creating bits of art like this using leftovers because it makes me feel like I'm getting my money's worth. I'm not tight, I'm not a skinflint or anything like that. I just like to know that what I'm using, I'm getting the most out of. So with something like the Christmas and festive pack, if you can use it up that year, then so much the better. So I'll probably end up creating a couple of little Christmas cards as well with the remaining bits and pieces of that ephemera pack. I won't save it till next year. I just don't have the storage for it. So now that I'm adding one of the last pieces to my layout, I'm just going to go around now with the craft glue and just stick down those edges that I missed off deliberately before. I'm not going to be needing to leave them loose anymore because I've tucked in everything that I'm going to. So just adding those final few drops and blobs in the corners. So I now want to add a little bit of bling. So again, using up some leftovers, these are the remaining pearls from the Heart of Christmas canvas. So I'm just going to add a couple of rows of 3, so a couple of clusters of 3 of the pearls in the same size, just in 3 different areas using all 3 colours. So again, another great way to use up some of your stash. So that was the little row of green pearls. Okay, so now I want to add some more interest. So I'm going to be using the Snow White metallic acrylic paint, again from Indigo Blue. And I'm going to add a little bit of paint onto my craft mat, and then I have the lid of one of those small mister bottles, and I'm just going to use the lid just to create some little circles around my canvas with that white metallic paint. Again, this is going to add a little bit of interest. It will catch the light in all sorts of interesting ways and just help to lift it a little bit from the background. Again, just creating a couple of interest areas to draw the eye around the canvas. And of course, no Christmas canvas or piece of artwork would be complete without a few snowflakes. So I'm just going to use the excess that was left on my craft mat, just add a little bit more to it, and just add some water, and then just create some metallic white splatters around the page just to simulate falling snow. When I'm happy with all the splatters, I'm just going to grab my heat gun and just dry it off to make sure it's all nice and dry so I don't smudge it when I move on to the next step. And I wanted to add at least one little metal charm onto the front of the canvas, so I found this lonesome piece of holly which was sitting at the bottom of my drawer, and it's been there for quite some time. So because we're using up leftovers, I thought I'd just add that to the front of the canvas with a foam pad, just one of those three-dimensional little pop dots. So next up you can see me taking out my date stamp, and I'm just adjusting the date on there so it reads the 25th of December. Although it's not the 25th just yet, I want to add some date stamps as a decorative item to the canvas. So I'm going to add the date of Christmas around the canvas, and then I think I'm going to call it a day. Well, I hope you enjoyed that canvas, using up some of the leftover digi-downloads, the leftover ephemera, some of the leftover pearls that I used in the creation of the previous canvas. So all made up of bits and pieces that otherwise would have probably just get stuck in a drawer and left till next year. So I hope you did enjoy that video. If you did, please remember to give it a thumbs up, share the video with all your friends, and if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, you can do so by clicking the button at the end of this video. And that is it for this 7 days of Christmas series. So that was day 7. If you're one of my angels and you pop across to my blog tomorrow, there is an extra bonus video just for you. So that's over on my blog at mikedeakinart.com. So that's it from me. I will see you all again real soon. Bye for now.